So speaking as a resident of Massachusetts, where we live free or die.
Wait a minute, you have that mixed up. It's New Hampshire that lives free or die.
But in reality, we have had legalized marijuana for quite a while. You guys don't, so I guess we're living free.
Maybe you're not as confused as I am, but you know what? Once I go on the other side of the line, I'm in the live free or die state, and recreational marijuana is not legal. But once I come over to this side of the sign, recreational marijuana is legal in Massachusetts. But you want to know something that's even more confusing? On the federal level, weed, marijuana is still illegal. Yeah, under the federal law. So over here, New Hampshire, live free or die, recreational marijuana, illegal. Over on this side of the sign, Massachusetts, recreational marijuana, legal. Let's see if we can straighten out some of that confusion.
Many New Hampshire residents live less than 30 minutes away from a dispensary, but weed is still illegal. That's a little weird. So, I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
Today, we have Nate Graziano today with us, and he's going to talk about his article in Inklink, talking a little bit about how weird that is. How are you doing today, Nate?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been working at Inklink?
I've been a columnist at Inklink for about 3 years now. So I also do some reporting as well.
Okay. And now you are of a similar mind to a lot of people where it's a little bit of a ridiculous situation where you can live in New Hampshire, but everywhere around us, Maine, Vermont, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts.
It's patently absurd.
Yeah. So did you want to read us a little excerpt of your article today?
Sure, I'll read the very beginning of it here. I make this drive from Manchester to Tingsboro, Massachusetts, for the same reason as many of my fellow New Hampshire residents, whose license plates filled the parking lot of the marijuana dispensary that's located a hop and a skip from the Nashua border. And each time I visit the dispensary, although, of course, I discard all contraband at the border and pay exorbitant sales tax on the merchandise, it begs the same nagging question. Why hasn't New Hampshire legalized weed for recreational use yet? Why isn't that tax money going toward funding my own state? While every other New England state has hopped onto the gravy train, New Hampshire has remained obdurate in its crusade to, what exactly? Protect the children? Prevent crazed gangs of potheads from raping and pillaging while whacked out on weed? Does anyone seriously still believe that marijuana is a gateway drug? Meanwhile, a bigger gateway drug can be happily purchased at the state-sponsored liquor stores and plazas directly off the New Hampshire interstate.
Well, I was waving the articles around here because I just clipped a couple of stories out of the newspaper, and I think, as you know, the thing passed in the House, but it was rejected in the Senate, and one of the senators actually said, yes, he felt that marijuana is a gateway drug, and with all the fentanyl issues that I'm not siding with him. I'm just saying that was what was reported.
Now, may I add to that there have also been some studies where they're actually using marijuana effectively to treat withdrawals from heroin as opposed to methadone or Suboxone. So I'm not sure what that guy was smoking.
Yeah, and you also mentioned too with the gambling that now that's like something way more intense that's legal, that even now kids with crypto gambling and all of that stuff, there's so many bigger issues right now that are able to go to and from, where you have something that's minor. It's been in Massachusetts, it's everywhere else, and we're like the only one in New England really that doesn't have that.
Well, and again, I've personally seen more families and more lives destroyed by gambling addiction than I have with marijuana. And I find that to be really one of the most glaring hypocrisies of our governor, who now I guess is sort of okay, kind of.
It's like, well, everybody else wants it.
Nunu was more than happy to tout and celebrate his DraftKings account when New Hampshire legalized that. I don't understand it, quite honestly.
Mhm. So you think it's kind of just all blown out of proportion that all this anti-marijuana stuff, it's like we have cigarettes, we have alcohol, we have
Sure.
gambling. You think it's weird to cross the line at weed?
Well, yeah. I mean, the propaganda machine has been in place since the 1930s, and really what it is just a inundation of misinformation. Now, let me preface it with, I'm not certainly saying that everyone should go out and smoke weed or take edibles, and certainly it shouldn't be it shouldn't be accessible to those under 21. It should be treated in the same way that alcohol is treated. But relative to alcohol, marijuana is fairly innocuous. Just look at the statistics. How many domestic violence calls are a result of someone getting really high. Basically it's we're gonna fight after I finish this bag of Fritos and finish watching the Brady Bunch. Come on, and yet somehow alcohol is acceptable. Again, these mixed messages don't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I guess something that, and I'm new to New Hampshire. I mean, I've been here for about 6, 7 years. But when I look at places like New York, the black market is crazy. It's so interesting to see like the dichotomy of Massachusetts, where it's like you go, you pull up, they come to your car, they deliver your like they have it all set up. But then in places like New York, it's out of control. There's smoke shops everywhere that aren't illegal, selling joints and things like that. And I wonder if one of the things that New Hampshire's worried is like, how are we gonna even manage this? Is it gonna be like liquor stores? Is it gonna be state run? Like, are we gonna have these black market smoke shops?
It's certainly a legitimate concern because the marijuana on the black market is invariably going to be cheaper. How legally do you contend with that? I'm not quite sure. I mean, maybe you stiffen the penalties for selling and buying in the black market. But the other thing with the black market now too is that with fentanyl and all of these drugs being laced and pills being pressed, you're never really sure what you're getting. Where in dispensaries, you can purchase what you need and what you want and what's going to be preferential or beneficial to you. I mean, don't overlook its medicinal benefits either.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you say, where it's different when you know exactly what you're getting, how much, the percentages, where it's more tightly regulated. And I guess another concern that I don't know if you would have any input on, I don't know if you have kids, but I know with schools right now, it's kind of like this huge fiasco. Kids are bringing weed pens and stuff like that. And I'm curious of how much of a concern things like that are, where it is legal all around us. People can't cross the border and get these vape carts. And now you have these kids in school out of control.
Honestly, I can't see where that's going to make too much of a difference. Any teenager who wants marijuana can get marijuana. The weed pens, I think probably the bigger problem there is vaping in general. You have a lot of adolescents now who have looked at vaping as a safer alternative to cigarettes, and they're addicted to that. Whatever they're vaping, and again, vaping marijuana is not good for you. No one's saying this is good for you. It's health. I think the effect of legalizing it and kids having access to it is going to be negligible. Again, you can hop over to Maine, drive down to Massachusetts in the same way that you're going to get your older brother to buy you a 12-pack. You can do the same thing with weed.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like historically, like kids smoking in school is not anything too crazy in
Right.
US.
Yeah. Smoking in
Hearing
the
as
boys'
it
room.
is.
It's the same thing as when I was in school, only they're vaping in the boys' room now. Not quite as catchy a song, but
Well, and you did a comparison to like people vaping instead of alternative to cigarettes, and cigarettes were another thing. Like now, not
oh
as
yeah.
much, but in school, like smoking cigarettes in school is the thing. So you would compare pretty much weed to cigarettes in that sense.
Yeah. I mean, I would much rather, I think, health wise, an adolescent smoke weed than cigarettes.
No rat poison.
Statistics speak for themselves there. I mean, smoking anything, again, it's bad for you. No one's saying, that smoking marijuana or even eating edibles, which, again, you can do that right there with your Cocoa Puffs in the morning, and it doesn't, I don't really get it. But I don't see that as being a legitimate deterrent to recreational use and legalization.
And I think a lot of people have made the argument, and you may agree with this, where when you legalize something, it makes it a little bit more acceptable for people to go and get help when they are
Sure.
struggling with addiction and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and again, if we were to I live in Manchester. If we're gonna go down to a rehab clinic, I'm fairly certain most of the patients there are not marijuana addicts.
Yeah.
They're alcoholics, they're heroin addicts, they're pill addicts, they're most. I've never read a study that has said that marijuana is addictive. It can be certainly psychologically addictive. It can be something that people overuse and misuse as a way of sort of coping and getting through the day, and that's a problem. But you're not going into withdrawals, because you can't take a bond rip. That just again,
It's not a physical, it's a
no.
psychological dependence.
Sure, yeah.
And when you make things like that illegal, like a lot of parents, their kids might be smoking weed. And it's like, oh my God, my kid has an addiction. I got to send them to rehab. And that's doing a lot more harm because it's
Right.
so scary for the parent. They freak out because it's illegal.
Right.
And now this kid has the psychological damage of going to rehab with people who have physical dependencies.
Yeah. And again, it's more misinformation and more propaganda being, spit. I what I really don't understand, again, is that we live in a very divisive political climate right now. And the only thing the left and right seem to agree on is weed. And so, I'm befuddled by the whole thing.
It's interesting, I guess, for me to see too, where it's almost like we had like a little bit of progress and then no, and it feels almost like there's nothing that people can really do to make their opinions heard, to make this happen. And especially seeing it around the border, where what can even people do to have any impact in this,
Well, and Sununu for his entire term up until recently has threatened any bill with a veto pen. But hey, have you seen his DraftKings account?
The gambling never hurt anybody.
Well,
right.
after the Senate killed the bill that the House approved, the governor came out, and I'm holding up the headline. The governor came out and said, well, now that it's almost the end of the session, I would approve legalizing marijuana under certain conditions, and that it be sold under the same sort of regulatory scheme that New Hampshire has successfly marketed and profited from the sale of liquor for decades, if not longer.
So once again, follow the buck. And certainly, I think there's probably financial incentives there. If we're not looking at common sense, we're looking at dollar signs.
And there really is no financial downfall it seems like it's all going to be a benefit. I mean, we're getting more
I
tax money.
could, yeah,
with all of
I
this.
couldn't see any unless of course, you're moving, a quarter pound yourself, and living off of that income illegally.
Now, Nathan, you're from Manchester. We have an irregular feature on this show where we go out and we talk to people on the street. And
Nice.
I went out and I spoke to people on the street in Manchester. And before I play those responses, I'm going to put you in the spot and ask you to guess the proportion of how many people were for legalization and how many people were against.
I would say it was probably 70-34.
Wow, pretty close. Let's take a look.
There should be some rules and regulations towards, like drinking and driving. You shouldn't smoke weed and drive and stuff like that. But as a whole, it should be something that it helps. It's a recreational to it. People smoke it and relax and not fight.
I don't think it would make too much of a impact one way or another for marijuana users. Maybe it'll help people get it a little bit more easy access, but I think from a revenue standpoint, it might be good to play a little catch up with our surrounding states.
I remember the old potheads, they thought it was a bad idea because everybody else who actually wanted to make like a certain amount of income based off of what they were already doing, they were afraid of the change, that it would disrupt the amount of money they'd be able to make. But these days, I actually support legalizing marijuana.
Well, I think you should legalize it. If you can legalize beer, if I can go home and get drunk in a car and almost kill somebody, I don't see why you should legalize weed. It's less effective than that.
Well, you don't mean you would do a thing like that, right?
Oh, I wouldn't do a thing. I don't even like to drink. I wouldn't do a thing. I wouldn't get behind the wheel, but I know I can get behind the wheel drinking this. It's all right.
Why do you think New Hampshire's waited so long to legalize marijuana?
I don't know. So many states have. I'm not really pinpointing New Hampshire. There's so many states other than New Hampshire that have not legalized this. So I understand, but I think it's a good tax evasion. It brings a lot of money to the state.
I'm against it because all around us, all you do is smell weed at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock at night. We're at a non-smoking hotel and we smell weed.
So you're against it?
I'm against it, yeah. I'd rather New Hampshire say do their own thing because I don't think we need it. You go to Massachusetts, you go to Maine, go to Vermont, get your weed and move on.
The people will be arrested about that is not fair. So that's my point.
You don't think it's fair that people get a legal record for possessing marijuana?
Yes.
So if you were in the legislature, you would vote for it, for legalizing it?
I think yes.
Well, I don't smoke marijuana, but I don't see a problem with it. All the states in Canada around New Hampshire have legalized it, so why shouldn't New Hampshire legalize it?
You have a live or let live philosophy, is that it?
Yeah, I don't. It doesn't bother me. I mean, to me, it's a soft drug, and they've been smoking it legally in coffee shops in the Netherlands for years and years and years. It's not a gateway drug like everybody seems to think. It's just it's like alcohol. Only it's less dangerous than alcohol.
So speaking as a resident of Massachusetts, where we live free or die.
Wait a minute, you have that mixed up. It's New Hampshire that lives free or die.
But in reality, we have had legalized marijuana for quite a while. You guys don't. So I guess we're living free and anyway. So in Massachusetts, it's very regulated, right? You go into a smoke shop or cannabis shop, whatever they call it, right? Everything's like really, it's kind of weird. It's all locked down and it's very specific what they can sell, what they can't sell, who they can sell it to. You have to show ID. It's all this stuff. So I think knowing New Hampshire, they'll probably just give away with every handgun purchase or something. But in Massachusetts, they are kind of regulating it.
Okay, so you think it's been a success in Mass, and New Hampshire should do it?
I think it's kind of mixed. I think it's better than having it illegal, but it should be controlled.
All right, we're back.
It's like the only arguments against it are out of inconvenience.
In fairness, I have to add, there was one woman that I spoke to, and she refused to go on camera, but she was adamantly against legalizing marijuana. Why she wouldn't want to go on camera, I don't know. I guess some people, aren't supposed to be at a certain place at a certain time. But so I think I wasn't actually keeping track Nate, but I think you were right about 70-30, maybe 80-20. I'm not sure. Were you keeping track?
No, I'm not a math guy. First of all, my thoughts and prayers go out to that poor man who's being assaulted daily with the smell of marijuana. I feel for him. Is that really the best excuse you got? I smell
like,
weed
no, we should
everywhere.
legalize it. I already have this problem.
Oh, you poor little thing, you. And the last guy actually brought up another very legitimate point. Why is it I can go down the road and buy a gun? I can buy a gun, but I can't buy a joint.
Get around.
Okay. Sure.
I think the guy's point was, because some of that landed on the proverbial editing room floor. I think his point was that he was staying in or living in a hotel and he smells it all the time. And I guess if you don't want to be smelling it, the smell.
Sure.
I can see his point. I'm not saying I agree with him, but I'm saying I can see that point, that if he's living in a place where people are smoking pot all the time, I can see that would be annoying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna argue fragrances here, but cigarettes are far more hostile to the senses than weed.
Oh,
but,
I would agree 100%. I can't stand. I'm a reformed smoker. I haven't smoked for 30 years, but I'm the worst reformed smoker. I can't stand it.
Yeah, that to me is much more of a fetid stench than marijuana, but that's relative. And
either way, it falls on the responsibility of the place, like management, where it's just like, if you have people smoking in rooms where you shouldn't be smoking anyway, that's not a problem with legalization.
Yeah, right. And it would be, I would assume, treated very much like cigarettes. You would have to go outside to smoke. You can't, just light up in a bar. I mean, certainly you could take an edible before you go in, but
Exactly. There's some kind of structure around it already. We can't smoke cigarettes.
And I agree with that. There have to be rules. It's
we want,
I don't know, but I think what the governor was saying was, if the thing was restricted, like the sale of liquor. Now, I had a proposal myself. I'm not a legislator and I never will be, but my idea was this. We have all these huge liquor stores on Route 93. You go from Manchester up to Concord. They're on both sides. In Portsmouth, you name it. Salem, Derry just got they are everywhere. And my feeling was, they're so huge, some of them, why not just clear out a little section in the back and just start selling marijuana there? We've already got the bureaucracy. We've already got people sitting in their chairs looking for something to do. We've already got the mechanism by state statute to market all of this. Why not just sell it out of the state stores? Now, I know that I'm really naive in a lot of ways, and that's probably one of them. But would you go for a model similar to, I think, what the governor was suggesting, not my idea, but having the state through some kind of a commission doing it, or by having licensees like you mentioned before in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to that idea at all. And again, it makes a lot of sense. Certainly no one's saying that you're not going to tax the hell out of it. But again, you're already paying close to 20% tax when I buy it in Massachusetts. So why is that money not going to our own state? Particularly, you don't have a sales tax, you don't have an income tax. We use a lot of the money from Keno and the lottery to fund education. Take that money and funnel it into back into the state. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, and especially when the people in education have a legitimate point that it's very unfair. The property-rich states, are able to fund the schools, and the states that the towns and cities that aren't so property-rich don't have the money to fund the schools. And it's for years and years and years has been an inequity in that area. And why not? I think the tax that the bill that was killed in the Senate would have given 12.5% was the tax that would have gone to the state. So why? You make a very valid point.
Yep.
Yeah. People drive down to Massachusetts.
Yeah. No. Again. Yeah. I believe, and you'd probably know better than me, Andrew. Didn't the Claremont case go to the Supreme Court at one point?
Yep. Sure did.
Yeah.
Sure did. And the education has never really been funded. To change the subject a little bit. You were talking about prohibition back in the 1920s. Just an interesting little aside. My grandfather was a pharmacist in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. A really nice man, but he spent his life as a pharmacist and then a pharmaceutical salesman for a large company. And when he was clearing out, sadly, he had to clear out his house and go to a long-term care facility. He gave me a couple of books, his stamp collection, his coin collection. He was showing me his sample book from his early days as a pharmacist in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And one of the things in the sample book was a little plasticine pouch containing marijuana. And he explained to me, first of all, he said, I'm sure you've never seen anything like this. And then he said, it was actually legal when he first started practicing as a pharmacist back in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So something that people lose track of is that marijuana was in fact legal in this country until a certain point when people decided that it wasn't going to be legal anymore. And I just thought that was an interesting little aside that it was legal before. And I don't know the history of it. I wish I did, but they made it illegal.
Well, yeah, I won't. I know a little bit about it, but again, federally, marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug up there with heroin and cocaine and treated the same way. Yeah. And I think one of the big reasons that it's not legal federally is that we have a $1 billion pharmaceutical industry. And each one of the quote unquote Schedule 1 drugs, recreational drugs, with the exception of maybe an LSD, they have chemical cousins. With cocaine, you have Adderall. With heroin, you have that whole school of opiates that actually got us into this crisis that we're in now. The opiate crisis was started by the pharmaceutical companies, and I believe it's Purdue. Is it Purdue? One of the pharmaceutical companies rightfully is paying through the nose for it right now.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't want to play devil's advocate, but since you're the one that brought up these other drugs, I'm going to play devil's advocate and point out one of the senators said something to the effect, and now just recently there's been a proposal in Massachusetts that they legalize mushrooms, and apparently psychedelic mushrooms are in fact legal in Oregon and in Colorado. And now the Massachusetts legislature had a hearing. They tabled it. But now there has been a petition presented to the Attorney General to put it on the ballot that people in Massachusetts are going to be considering psychedelic mushrooms. So to play devil's advocate, I mean, don't people that advocate for marijuana, don't they just want to open the door to bring in harder drugs?
Well, one, psilocybin has had some success in microdosing, by the way, not just taking a whole bag of mushrooms and shoving them down your throat, but in microdosing, it's had some positive feedback on treating things like PTSD and depression. And so there's a very interesting Netflix series. It's called, I believe it's called How to Change Your Mind. That goes into the history of psychedelics. It goes into, ecstasy and LSD and psilocybin, and looks at the history of those and how they're being used now, actually, to treat a number of psychological illness and mental illnesses.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about that, and people talk about, like, I don't know anything about that, but like I've heard like ketamine and like controlled trials and things like that. People
These are very, very controlled studies. It's not, hey, here's
go have fun.
Go wander in the desert and have your Jim Morrison experience.
And I think a good point with legalizing is that when you do legalize things, you open the room for more trial and more study, where it's these things where people need help for it, and maybe things can have benefits. And if it's locked behind the door where everybody thinks is a scary thing, no progress.
It's interesting, Lainey, because the other thing that legalizing it recreationally, not that it's that much of an issue, but it destigmatizes it. This idea that everyone who uses marijuana is Jeff Spicoli, stumbling out of the van, potheads are slow and stupid, and it gets rid of that, it gets rid of that stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Well, drunks aren't much better. I mean, who wants to work with a drunk? I mean,
in fact, much worse.
I mean, especially if the drunk is a truck driver or driving a forklift on the warehouse floor. I mean, nobody wants anybody doing any of those things, I don't think.
Well, and that's another good point, Andrew, that, certainly the laws remain in place. You treat driving while intoxicated the same way with marijuana that you would alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the New Hampshire law, the drunk driving statute in New Hampshire is broken down into two components. One is, if you can get a per se violation by them blowing on the breathalyzer, but then the other portion of the law is impairment, and it doesn't matter what you can be arrested. And a lot of people don't understand this, but in New Hampshire, you can be convicted of driving impaired on prescription drugs. Because people in the old days used to say, officer, that wasn't marijuana or booze, that was a prescription medication.
Right.
Well, if you're impaired from anything at all, so if the day comes where marijuana is legalized in New Hampshire, which I'm thinking it's going to happen, you still may not drive a vehicle impaired by any substance. Now, there's a whole other issue, and we don't necessarily have to go down the rabbit hole today, but the law enforcement community still, even though you read stuff in the newspaper, they still don't really have a scientifically acceptable way to determine a per se limit for THC, as there is with alcohol. But I guess that's another conversation for another day. Let me ask you to get out your crystal ball. I always ask all of our guests, I put you in the spot. Get out your crystal ball, and do you think that weed will be legalized in New Hampshire next year?
I think that's a little ambitious. I think it will be legalized, but I don't think it's going to happen. When we're coming upon an election year, I would say probably within 2 to 3 years would be my guess.
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's interesting, Nate, that you feel that the marijuana issue would not go anywhere in a political year, because you yourself guessed, and our people on the street in Manchester did kind of go, again, I'm not a math expert, but I think it was 70-30 or even 80-20 for legalization of weed. And so it interested me that you said that you don't think a politician would want to legalize weed in an election year. It could go the other way too. If the
absolutely, I could be dead wrong on that.
Well, so could I, but you and I both know that in the political world, and I know I'm going to get a lot of bad comments about this, and so I probably shouldn't even say it, and I don't apologize in advance, but most politicians, how are the polls going? If the polls are going this way, so. Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nate, for spending all this time and chatting with us. For anybody interested, I will be linking to his page on Manchester Ink Link. So if anybody's interested in finding about more local news about New Hampshire, be sure to check that out. Again, thank you so much for joining us. If you've made it this far, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we're looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one. You have been watching About the Law, a production of the law offices of Andrew D. Myers in Methuen in the Merrimack Valley of Massachusetts, and in Derry, just outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. Remember to click the like and subscribe buttons down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to share it with your friends and others. If you'd like to talk to me about an injury case, a car accident, a slip and fall, a serious bodily injury case, or some other case, please feel free to contact me. I'd love to talk to you. You can contact us through my website at attorney-myers.com. We have a contact us block, or you can call on one of the telephone numbers we've given there, or you can email me at andrew@attorney-myers.com. The foregoing is offered for informational purposes only. It is not intended as and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary widely from state to state. You should rely only on the advice given to you during a personal consultation by a local attorney thoroughly familiar with state laws and the area of practice in which your concern lies. This podcast must be and hereby is labeled advertisement in some jurisdictions.